Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have our co-host, Blake, in the Escape Pod today to chat all about Darth Maul and what happened. So I'll explain that in just a bit, but just a quick reminder, if you guys haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. It's free, and we don't ask for any help other than sharing this show with a friend and leaving nice reviews. So that would be fantastic if you'd be able to do that really quickly. I just wanted to say that at the very start. But let's get into Darth Maul here. An amazing character. We got lots to chat about, lots to cover. So let's get right into it. That and the Darksaber, of course.
Another happy landing.
All right, we got Blake in the Escape Pod. Welcome back.
Hello there.
Hello there. So we have our What Happened series, which is a sub-series on the podcast dedicated to really just talking about very specific characters, the events that transpired through their story, and how it interweaves into the Skywalker saga. And we're going to be going through all the formats that they've been inside. So today we're going to be starting chronologically, of course, with the Darth Maul Marvel comic miniseries. And we're going to be working our way up from there through Age of Republic, which is another Marvel comic that Darth Maul popped up in. Then moving on to the Phantom Menace. And then, of course, Star Wars The Clone Wars. And then the canceled period where Star Wars The Clone Wars was happening, and we do the Dark Disciple comic book, which is adapted Clone Wars episodes. Then we're going to be doing more Clone Wars, and moving up to Solo, and then Star Wars Rebels. So a lot of stuff to cover today. And of course, this is a very iconic villain, a very iconic character in general for the Phantom Menace. I mean, there's nothing else like him.
Yeah, I mean, when they first started showing all the advertisements for the Phantom Menace, they revealed Darth Maul, and he basically just looks like Satan. Like all these kids look at it, he looks like the devil. So yeah, you find we're gonna see more Sith outside of Sidious and Vader, and the first guy you see just looks like, well, the devil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I remember what Dave Filoni has said about Darth Maul, and he said very specifically, he said, look at Darth Maul, he's designed to look evil. Like it's like whole aesthetic of the character, the whole aesthetic of
the eyes, the spikes, the tattoos.
Yeah, and Zabrix weren't a thing, I don't think, before the Phantom Menace came out.
No, Darth Maul was the first one that we ever saw, and there was a lot of weird fan theories about that, I think, too, making that maybe he was a creation of the Sith because he looks so evil.
Right. Yeah, there was, I remember very few of those earlier fan theories, aside from some of the ones that surrounded Revenge of the Sith, But yeah, I can imagine, especially after reading our vintage article, the 1980s Clone Wars article that was written by a guy in 1980, speculating on the next film and the films that came before it, which was a very interesting thing to go through. But it made me think. I said, like, after people saw the Phantom Menace trailer, kind of like what did people actually, how did people respond to that character and like that visual aesthetic? And obviously it drove people to the theaters in troves in mass
people were
amounts of
so
numbers.
Excited.
Oh yeah. It was like the first Star Wars movie in 20 years almost, or so, like almost 20 years.
Let's not forget, Darth Maul was the first person ever to be revealed with a double-bladed lightsaber, and people went nuts.
Yeah,
just
that too.
Nuts for that.
And that's something I think that some fans probably fantasized about way back when, before Phantom Menace came out. It's like, oh, what if, there was a double bladed lightsaber? Like, oh,
Yeah.
It's like probably the
I'm
best
starting to
thing
think, was that a thing? I feel like it wasn't until Darth Maul where coming up with different versions of lightsabers was really a thing.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I feel like it was just swords.
Right. Well, very similar to Mace Windu, Samuel Jackson requesting his purple lightsaber, and George saying to him, like, well, lightsabers are green or lightsabers are blue. And so I think of that story. There's always a first. There's always a first for anything. And so, and Kylo Ren
once
comes
that
along.
door's open, right?
Right. And Kylo Ren comes along and does we get the cross guard saber, and now we get that in Star Wars Rebels. Now we're getting it in we're getting a similar looking design of many of the hilts in the High Republic era, except they're not cross blades, they're just like the hilt themselves has got the cross beam to it. But it's inspiration that kind of trickles down the stories,
right? I'm trying to
right?
remember, because I know force pikes were a thing for a long time, which we briefly talked about, I think, in the High Republic episode.
There was a mention of a ancient Sith weapon called the light spear, which I don't know if it's the same as a light pike or if it is the same thing. And
I think it just might be a rebrand of the same thing. A force pike was the EU version of a long stick with a little lightsaber at the end. And but the reason why I bring it up is I'm not sure if stuff like that existed before Darth Maul or after.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Many of that expanded universe material did come out after the prequels were starting to come out, right?
Yeah, and reinvigorate the whole franchise.
Because now there was this visual aesthetic to Coruscant and the Jedi Temple and all that stuff, and so the prequels really, they did a lot of world building in the sense of giving you a picture of Star Wars that hadn't really been seen before, and as well as this whole new kind of perspective on lightsaber combat, because we'd never seen any vicious fighting. Oh man, the way that Maul fights,
the speed difference, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I bet Mark Hamill was in the theater watching that, and when they get to the fight scenes, the lightsabers, he probably turned to George and was like, "Why couldn't I do that?" Because I know they had conversations on set where Mark Hamill was talking about, he started swinging around a little faster, like, "Hey, George, can I do this?" And then George was like, "No, lightsabers are really heavy. You can't do that. They're real slow."
Yeah, he really wanted it to be samurai style fighting,
the first time he described it was like heavy two-handed Scottish claymores.
Right. Yeah. Something like that. And his inspiration coming from a lot of the Japanese films where sword fighting, swords in general are always heavy. Like, you can get really well-crafted lighter swords, but in general, it's like, it's still a beam of metal.
Yeah.
So whereas a lightsaber, I don't think the blade, at least conceptually nowadays, isn't supposed to weigh anying. It's just
it's supposed to be just energy.
Yeah, but that wasn't
electricity.
The idea
doesn't weigh anything, right?
Right. Yeah. So this whole idea of what happened, which we've got a few names on the list to kind of get through going forward, here and there as we kind of get to them, sort of thing. But it came up as an idea after a friend of mine who's also a listener of the show said to me, is like, why don't you do an episode about like, I think it was Darth Maul and the dark saber and just talk about that. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, and then this is where the idea started turning for like, oh, well, there's also all these Mandalorian characters that now we've seen in multiple forms of media.
Yep.
Wouldn't it be cool to do like a series in the show that's kind of dedicated to talking about these characters that have popped up through, Clone Wars and Rebels, and then later in Mandalorian, and
it all connects together. Yeah.
Right. And many people haven't seen those shows, even though they've been out
that's exactly it.
a long time. Yeah.
There is definitely something to be told there that a lot of people would like to hear, I think, because
Yeah.
they watch The Mandalorian and then they see these characters show up and they may think they're new and have no idea what these backstories are of these characters. And there's so
Right,
much
yeah.
media and story that they're just missing out on. I mean,
Yeah.
not everyone's seen the Clone Wars, and that it may have been the first time they ever met Ahsoka Tano was in The Mandalorian season 2.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's possible that perhaps even to many fans who have been familiar with the character, that they've never even seen her on screen. They've only seen like photographs and stuff as well, right? So, or a character like Bo-Katan, who's even more of a minor character than Ahsoka is in the show. Like they might not even, they're like, oh, who's this, right? So it's and you know, my first kind of recommendation to anyone out there listening to this particular episode, as well as any of our future What Happened episodes, is obviously just to go and watch those shows for yourself at some point. You know, it's never the same listening to somebody else chat about a Star Wars story and you know, and filling you in on the gaps other than watching it yourself. But
Darth Maul is a good place to start, because I went and rewatched all the Darth Maul episodes, excluding Phantom Menace, because I feel pretty comfortable with that. And there's not actually that much. There's 5 episodes of the Clone Wars and then 3 episodes of Rebels, and you're pretty much done.
Yeah, and you know, if you're in the mood for only watching, you know, that particular content with that particular character, you know, there's ways to find out which episodes they pop up in, so you can kind of keep track of yourself of like where this character came from. Obviously, in the sense of the context of the whole show, you know, watching Clone Wars beginning to end is an experience unlike anything else. It's a 7-season Star Wars show, which is the biggest Star Wars show that we have.
Fills in a lot of blanks.
And it fills in a lot of blanks with many, many characters. And to this day remains one of my favorite parts of Star Wars in general. And then there's, of course, Rebels.
If you watch the Clone Wars beginning to end, you will never see the prequel movies the same. It will be much better.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who will say they're worse watching that. It just improves the story 100-fold.
Right. Yeah, and you know, and to anyone listening, if you're curious about going through it chronologically, which is the recommended way to do it, because the episodes do jump around a lot, but there is a particular order to watching it. Go back and scroll through our episode library to Clone Wars Talk Part 1, and there's 40 episodes that you can go through, and Escape Pod will just help keep you on track, and it's like an after show style thing where we myself and a co-host Diego, we just talk about episode arcs at a time through the length of the entire show from season 1 to season 7, including all the unproduced episodes after Disney canceled the program for a short while. So definitely worth looking into if you haven't listened to that series yet. But yeah, Darth Maul, like you were saying, it's a perfect character to start with, because he, first of all, isn't in that many things. You know, his appearance in The Phantom Menace is brief. His appearance in Solo is brief. His appearance in the Clone Wars, there's few episodes, and in Rebels, there's even less. So you know, it's very
that surprised me so much.
It's but I mean,
he's such an important character, and he does a lot.
Yes, and you tally all this stuff up, and it does make a reasonable story arc of some kind. You know, and when I think about it, it's like, yes, Anakin is in all the movies, but oh wait, he's not. Like, he's in 6 of now 9 episodes, and half of it he's a villain, which is not the main character. Even though the stories, according to George, about him. So like, again, like it's like in my head, I'm like, oh well, maybe Maul actually had more time in general than I thought. And of course, now we have these comic books that we're also going to be starting with, which kind of tell a story of Maul before the Phantom Menace begins and his time in hiding. And so we're gonna start with that, but so in in a nutshell, I mean, we'll go through this beginning to end and just talk about the character for a little while. So we start off with the Marvel Star Wars Darth Maul miniseries, which I think was about 4 issues long. You can get it in a trade paperback, but there's a couple bullet points I had about this one, but just in general, like, did you read that one, the miniseries?
I did. Yep, I read through it.
Yeah, how'd you like it? It takes place maybe like I don't know. If you were to ballpark it, how much time before Phantom Menace?
I feel like it couldn't have been that much before Phantom Menace. I'd say maybe a year or two at the most, to be honest. I'm not sure how long Darth Maul was apprenticed for. I guess since he was a boy. And we meet Darth Maul in the Phantom Menace, and he seems like he'd be in his mid-20s, right?
Yeah, because I think that's how old Ray Park was when they shot the movie. So it's possible it's around there. But
yeah, so I would say in this comic series, well, maybe just based on the story, he'd probably be 17, or like early 20s, like 20-ish, like almost exactly 20. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say between like 1 and 5 years before.
Right. And that's probably the best, because it's this miniseries, and then there's a single issue that follows this miniseries in another comic after. But the primary kind of goal, or the way that they start off this comic is pretty interesting, because Maul's growing very restless as Palpatine's plan is kind of slowly clicking into place. And he's unwilling to wait much longer for revealing himself to the Jedi, right? Like, that's something that in the Phantom Menace he's very adamant about.
He wants vengeance, right?
Yeah, he wants vengeance, and that's actually something
he's been trained. Yeah, he's been trained and built for his only goal is to get revenge on the Jedi, and he just feels that Palpatine is holding him back from him achieving. He thinks he's ready to go and fight the Jedi and start slaughtering them. But Palpatine's just holding him back from his goal. Right.
Yeah, and so he fills his time hunting Rathtars and for entertainment.
Sport.
For sport. And I love how they refer to it in the comic book. He refers to it as a hollow meal.
Yeah. It doesn't satisfy him. Doesn't quench the taste.
Right. Doesn't quench the taste. Yeah. But shortly after that, he goes to Palpatine sends him on a mission to go liberate one of their allies in the Trade Federation from some pirates that are like attacking one of their space stations or whatever. And he ends up finding out that there's an auction being held on Nar Shaddaa, or somewhere close to there, that a Jedi, or is like some space station out in outer rim somewhere, and the Jedi's name is
some private space station.
And the Jedi's name is Eldra Kaitis or something, and she's a Jedi Padawan, a Twi'lek, and being held, and she's going to be she's held in slavery right now, in captivity, and she's going to be auctioned off. So
she does have a lot of attitude.
Yeah, and it very snippy. Kind of reminded me of Ahsoka in a sense.
Ahsoka, yeah.
Yeah,
I got that too.
Yeah.
This is the ending of Ahsoka that so many fans wanted in season 1 and 2 of the Clone Wars.
Oh man, can you imagine? He sees it as an opportunity to kill a Jedi, basically, right? So he goes to Nar Shaddaa, I guess, to uncover some information about this whole thing, and 2 very interesting characters show up. We had Cad Bane show up, and we had Aura Singh, and another little... Yeah,
those 2 are inseparable.
Yeah, and another 2 weasel character thing, a mosquito character that likes sucking blood out of his victims.
That was so strange. Yeah, just like collecting corpses and sucking them dry.
Right. And I was trying to remember.
That's going to be a race now.
Do you remember if there was some sort of bug creature in the cantina in episode 4? It kind of reminded me that there's bugs out there, like bug aliens.
Yep. Well, there's also the ant that we meet in the Mandalorian, right?
Right. Yeah. There's the ant.
So I think there's bug creatures in J.J. Abrams' cantina as well.
Oh yeah. That's true. In Maz Kanata's castle.
Yeah, or castle.
I love how you call it JJ's cantina.
Well, that's what it is. It was just a rehash of the cantina.
That's actually a pretty good name for a cantina. JJ's Cantina.
Welcome to JJ's Cantina.
You heard of JJ's Cantina? Nah, I'm over at Dex's Diner.
It's like across
They
the
got
street
much
from
better
each other.
burgers. They got blue milk. JJ's only has the green stuff.
You want any Jawa juice?
You want a cup of Jawa juice? So good. What is Jawa juice? Like,
I don't know. How many people even know what Jawas are? That's what I want to know. I thought, well, I guess now we know they're not isolated to Tatooine, but at the time, we thought it was just this.
Right.
Yeah, Jawas are like this obscure race from Tatooine that most people never heard of.
Right, and yeah, that's actually a good point. I never thought of that before, because of course most of it's from.
Oh man, that's why it's always bothered me. For years.
For years.
Anyway,
Mandalorians finally fixed that for you. Hey?
Yeah, they did a little bit. Look at that,
Off-world
Dave Filoni
Jawas.
fixing everything.
Off-world Jawas, yeah. So what's interesting about this area of the comic book is at one point Maul is meditating or something, and he has a vision of him on Malachor with Palpatine. And what I loved about this vision that he had, it's actually a memory, and it's him as a young boy being taken on basically a field trip or something to Malachor, which is a Sith
Sith field
world
trip.
A Sith field trip. Yeah, we'll have a Sith day out, and he
That's right.
has this deceptive vision of these Jedi, which of the big battle that happened there, Malachor, which is talked about in Star Wars Rebels, and he inhales some of the ashes from the dead victims of this war.
Well, not intentionally. Yeah, Palpatine kind of tricks him and sucks it into his body. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He goes and says, breathe in the ash or something like that. And he basically convinces
he inhales
young Maul,
an entire human.
And he basically convinces young Maul that the Jedi murdered the Sith, and Maul puts it in these words. He feels every pain, every cut, and every death of thousands of Sith, like by breathing in these ashes. Like he experiences pain unlike anything else. And then the revenge of the Sith becomes Maul's personal quest for revenge himself. So that's why he's always saying, I will have my revenge.
The death.
Yeah. He lives through all the deaths of like all the guys, right?
All the different Sith that he inhaled. Yeah. He lived through their actual final moments as they were slain by Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dying over and over again.
I really love this moment because to me it painted this picture of like, this is why Maul feels so vengeful towards the Jedi. And in the Phantom Menace, before he's even really done much, he says, "At last we will have our revenge." And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about, man?
We'll reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we'll have our revenge.
Yeah. And it's like for a long time, I've always wondered, like, what did the Jedi do to you? Like, maybe they did it to Sith 1,000 years ago, but like, that's 1,000 years ago. That's a long time. Like, I mean, if you think about 1,000 years ago in the real world, it's a long time ago.
I always just assumed that it is a long time ago, but I always thought the Sith were kind of a cult. So they indoctrinate you as a child, and they would just kind of warp your mind to brainwash you to believe this. Is what I always thought. But now we're learning that it is actually personal for Maul, because he's the Sith that were slain by these Jedi are now a part of him.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And so that's kind of where this whole comic book becomes very intriguing to me, because now it reveals his whole vengeful state of mind sort of thing. But Maul and the gangs, they basically, after a whole auctioning scene, they snake the Padawan from the winning bidder. And he in the ship, he actually repeats a little rhyme when he comes face to face with his Jedi Padawan, and he recites a rhyme called it's I don't know what it's called exactly, but it goes, far above, we don't know where we'll fall, far above, What once was great is rendered small. This is like a little line.
I think it's
a little
far
poem.
above, far below.
Well, I just copied this off the web, so yeah, maybe I don't know. But
Okay.
he repeats this in front of the Jedi, and basically, this is the same poem that he actually reads out by memory when he's losing his mind in the Clone Wars. When Savage Opress comes face to face with him on that
so
junk
cool.
world. Yeah, and this is the
I didn't
same,
even pick up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same set of words that he's going crazy, right? And so he's starting to go to the very depths of his mind, trying to find his identity, I guess. And this poem somehow exists down there. And he says it when he's face to face with this Jedi Padawan.
It's like
and
a
so
root.
yeah, and I was always wondering, like, because he's finally face to face with this Padawan. Like, this means so much to him that, like, this is like his vengeful moment. He's taking her to a place where they can duel it out. He's saving her, not killing her right away, kind of thing, so that they can duel in privacy. He can have his moment,
and
right?
saving her from these bounty hunters so he can kill her. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So Cad Bane and Aurra Sing kind of help him with this goal. And their ship, as they're flying away, turns out to be a sabotaged ship, and they crash on a moon called Drazkel. And then people buy in 350,000 credits to hunt the crashed ship and the Padawan that supposedly might be alive on it. So this person who's in charge of the auction and now this sabotage ship and all that, she's just raking it in, and this corrupt person just making tons of money, millions of credits.
Oh yeah, I mean, she already got paid for selling Jedi, and now she can get paid again for letting them try to hunt it. So
yeah, exactly. It's kind of a what you call double dipping.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But what I don't get is the bounty hunters. Why don't they just say no and then fly their ship down there anyway? What's she gonna do?
Right. I was thinking about that too when I was reading. I was like, what's stopping them all from just going to kill her anyway? Like, why do you have to pay?
There's scum and villainy.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
So at some point in the comic, Maul and Kaitis face off, and it's an interesting duel, and it's acknowledged that she is on the verge of becoming a knight. Like, if she passed if she passed her trial, she would be a Jedi Knight. So she's a very capable fighter. Yeah, and
I'm glad that they made it like that, because they had kind of let it up, kept talking about her being a Padawan over and over again, which made me think, be fighting some younglings that just left, Yoda's teachings. They're all learning about where all the planets are.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. I was about to ask you that too. Just like, what do you think of the fight? And but yeah, I'm glad you put it that way, because it is something that came up when I was thinking, like, oh, of course he's going to be excited to kill a Jedi of any age whatsoever. But it's revealed later that no, he wants to savor the moment. Like, he wants to actually have a good fight and win, kind of thing, right? Like, not just kill a person with stab them through the back. Like, he actually
just
wants,
for the sake of it. Yeah,
he wants
the challenge.
He wants the challenge. Yeah, he wants to prove himself. So to himself. Because he's doing this thinking that Palpatine doesn't know about it, because he's been forbid to face any Jedi yet, and all that stuff.
And that's crossing his mind the whole way through. We're just thinking he's got to keep this a secret from his master, from Palpatine, but he's worried that Palpatine's going to find out that he disobeyed him. Yeah,
exactly. So Maul wins. Maul wins the fight. And
shocking, I know.
It's shocking. Takes revenge on the auctioneer. I love how he gets Bane and Aurra Sing to fly him back up to the space station thing, and just so he can kill the auctioneer person. And she knows what he is. Like, before she dies, she actually mutters the word Sith. Yeah, which is very surprising. And Palpatine actually,
at this point in the galaxy, Sith haven't been around for 1,000 years, so that's very surprising.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder. It's like, oh, she had a sense of knowledge of as to like all this stuff, and maybe I don't know. It just, I like a good mysterious character, and the fact that she actually knows what the Sith are, whereas many other people mistake a Sith for a Jedi. It's very
and
uncommon.
It pisses Maul off every time.
It does, yeah, and
Makes me so mad.
and they do the same in the Clone Wars multiple times with some of the characters, like Savage Opress, when Obi-Wan or maybe it's Anakin or something is hunting down Maul and Savage Opress. They're asking somebody about them, and they're like, oh yeah, it was just some Jedi swinging a red lightsaber around, and people just don't care. Like, people just know the Jedi, and that's it. Like, they don't know about the Rule 2 or the Sith or whatever.
That's too obscure. Only the Jedi know about it.
Yeah. So Palpatine,
it does make it odd for this woman, but yeah.
So Palpatine planned for his deception and allowed him knowledge of the auction to test him and all that stuff. And it, by the end of the comic, you realize that Maul's bloodlust is still not satisfied. So that was kind of the first.
More blood.
Yeah, he wants more blood. That was kind of the first chunk. But I'm just curious, like, what did you think of the comic overall? Like, because you haven't read too many of them, have you? Too many of the Marvel comics?
Not a lot of comics, no. Oddly enough, the only real comic I've read all the way through before this one, I think, was Son of Dathomir several years ago. So. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I read that at your place.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
So did you like this one? I did
enjoy it. Yeah, it was actually shorter than I expected, but I thought it was really good. It was a good, solid backstory to Maul. It actually filled in some of the blanks. Because before that, the first time we see him is the Phantom Menace, and he just sort of appears out of the shadows behind Palpatine. And he says, I'm going to send my apprentice, right?
Right.
So it's good to have a little extra detail. And as we talked about earlier, the whole Sith ash thing re-inhaled I thought was super cool. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I love how twisted it is.
It is.
It's very Sith-like to inhale the ashes of your enemy, I guess, and get a vision out of it. So we had the next Marvel comic on the list, which is a single issue from the Age of Republic series. And this is combined in the hardcover format as well as available as a single issue. And it's also in the trade paperback format for the secluded villains only single issues from the Age of the Republic series. So it's widely available. Pretty easy to find. But yeah, what'd you think of this one?
I'm not sure I read this one, to be honest.
Oh, okay. So it's a single issue. It was very short. Maul is anxiously awaiting for the Sith to reveal themselves again, still. And he's thriving in the underworld of Coruscant still. And I would assume it doesn't take too much longer after the first series that we just went through, the miniseries. So this is kind of like the cap on top sort of thing. So it follows directly the events of where we left off. And he's basically now hunting for sport, for sensitive scum and villainy. Like he's hunting for sensitive smugglers and any force sensitive.
This kind of sounds like he's just gotten bored and just wants to occupy his time finding something of a challenge while he waits for Palpatine to finally release him.
Yeah, exactly. And Palpatine, he actually in this comic references the Padawan that Maul killed in the previous series. And I thought that was really interesting because of course that's how the first series ends. It's like Palpatine reveals like that was his plan all along, was that he planned the deception, allowed him to have the knowledge of the auction in the first place.
Padawan was there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he knew about all that stuff and knew that Maul would go after her. So he decided to let Maul have that little victory of his. And in the meantime, this comic was just reassuring all of us as readers of Star Wars comics, Maul is still just biding his time, waiting for Palpatine's big plan to come out. So that was all it was. Like, it was just one issue. I mean, he kills a guy. That was it.
Feels a little unnecessary with this description. Like, what else is he going to do? Retire before the Phantom Menace? Like,
right. Yeah. I mean, it's like we all know what's coming, right? So it's there's not too much, I guess, that you could do. But we're finally reached the Phantom Menace now, a movie that we've all seen a lot.
Phantom Menace.
Yes, and I don't need to fully recap to you exactly what this movie is about, but just for the heck of it, I've got 3 bullet points. So the Sith reveal themselves finally to they've revealed themselves to the Trade Federation, and they've formed an alliance there. And they begin a blockade and an invasion of Naboo. And Maul is tasked to capture the Queen and force her to sign a treaty that will make the invasion legal. So he tracks Amidala to Tatooine, where he fights Qui-Gon in the desert, which is finally kind of when he first reveals to the Jedi that the Sith are actually a thing. Qui-Gon goes back to the Jedi Temple and says, this is what I encountered. It's possible the Sith have returned. And that's when we have that conversation. It's like, Sith
very, very skeptical.
Years. Right. Yeah. Like, especially Mace Windu. And, they're all Kiadi Mundi. It's like the Sith have been extinct for millennia, all that stuff. And
no one believes them, right? They're very skeptical.
Yeah. No one believes them. And then the Queen decides to go back to Naboo to support her people because they're doing terribly over there. So Maul, once again, tracks them to Naboo, where he fights Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in the Duel of the Fates and kills Qui-Gon Jinn and loses his legs to Obi-Wan, falls down a big long shaft, and that is the end of Maul in that movie. And up until the last couple of years, actually up until the Clone Wars many years ago, we thought that was the end of it. But
that was it, yeah. And
Phantom
honestly, it's pretty unsatisfying just in the movie. Like, that's what we were originally left with until Clone Wars, and not even beginning Clone Wars. I think it's season 5 or something. They finally reveal him, or like end of season 3 or something.
Season 3. End of season 3. Yeah.
So that's a long time where Darth Maul just showed up. He looks like Satan. He has next to no lines, and then he kills Qui-Gon and then just vanishes, just killed, and never hear him again.
Gives a stand-up fight, and that was it.
Yeah, and I have to say, the improvement from what we saw in the comic to him killing Qui-Gon was a very substantial improvement, because he almost lost to that Padawan.
Right. Yeah. And you know what's significant about that that fight, and the reason why it's called the Duel of Fates, is this insane kind of explanation that Dave Filoni gave in the Mandalorian Gallery. Did you check that out at any point?
Referring to him from the Phantom Menace?
Yeah. So Dave Filoni had like an explanation as to why Duel of Fates is called Duel of Fates. So I actually, I heard this a while back, but I haven't heard it recently. But I do remember this. It's the fate of Anakin Skywalker. Yes, yeah. So Maul has a little to do with that, but I figured we would just listen to, or I guess listen/watch what Dave said in that thing, and sure. I'll also play it on the show here. But yeah, let's just take a brief listen to this thing, because I think it's one of the best conversations to be had about the Phantom Menace in general.
Prequels, I thought, were almost an impossible task. How do you tell the story that we've all grown up with, imagining who Anakin Skywalker was? You saw so many things in Phantom Menace that you just imagined, like the Jedi Council, and none of it really was what I had expected. But I know now that that's just like how creative George is. Like, he just sees it differently, and he's laying it down. And I love the lightsaber fight with Darth Maul, not because it's a lightsaber fight, but because George is so good at crafting why that fight's important every time. Like, the Obi-Wan Darth Vader fight isn't like the most wonderfully staged necessarily combat that you're ever going to see, but there's so much at stake. It's so meaningful when Obi-Wan dies that we all feel like Luke. In Phantom Menace, you're watching these two Jedi in their prime fight this evil villain. Maul couldn't be more obviously the villain. He's designed to look evil, and he is evil, and he just expresses that from his face all the way out through the type of lightsaber he fights with. What's at stake is really how Anakin's going to turn out, because Qui-Gon is different than the rest of the Jedi, and you get that in the movie, and Qui-Gon is fighting because he knows he's the father that Anakin needs, because Qui-Gon hasn't given up on the fact that Jedi are supposed to actually care and love, and that's not a bad thing. The rest of the Jedi are so detached and they've become so political that they've really lost their way. And Yoda starts to see that in the second film. But Qui-Gon is ahead of them all, and that's why he's not part of the council. So he's fighting for Anakin, and that's why it's the duel of the fates. It's the fate of this child. And depending on how this fight goes, Anakin his life is gonna be dramatically different. So Qui-Gon loses, of course. So the father figure, because he knew what it meant to take this kid away from his mother when he had an attachment, and he's left with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan trains Anakin at first out of a promise he makes to Qui-Gon, not because he cares about him. When they get Anakin, when they find him on Tatooine, he says, "Why do I feel like we've found another useless life form?" He's comparing Anakin to Jar Jar.
Excuse me.
And he's saying, this is a waste of our time. Why are we doing this? Why do you see importance in these creatures like Jar Jar Binks and this 10-year-old boy? This is useless. So he's a brother to Anakin eventually, but he's not a father figure. That's a failing for Anakin. He doesn't have the family that he needs. He loses his mother in the next film. He fails on this promise that he made to Mother, I will come back and save you. So he's left completely vulnerable. And Star Wars ultimately is about family. So that moment in that movie, which a lot of people I think diminish into just a cool lightsaber fight, but it's everything that the entire 3 films of the prequels hangs on, is that one particular fight. And Maul serves his purpose, and at that point died before George may bring him back, but he died. And that's showing you again how the Emperor is completely self-serving. He doesn't care, it's just a tool and he's using people, and now he's gonna use this child. That follows all the way through to the line which terrified me as a kid when the Emperor tells Luke, "You, like your father, are now mine." And the idea when I was a little kid watching that movie of some evil person possessing my father, making him do things or making him be evil was terrifying. That was like a thought that was horrible. Also, it's amazing when you watch Return of the Jedi that Luke has never done anything that I would call it like he's a bad character. He has like a tendency to be dark, and a lot of people wanted Anakin, oh, he should have been darker as a character. It's not true at all. I believed Luke would turn to the dark side in Return of the Jedi. I believe that was on the table. I believe that he would kill the Emperor, and because of the way George arranged the story, I knew that was the wrong thing to do. When he's saying, you know, you want your weapon, you know, strike me down, I am defenseless. He wants him to give into his anger. He wants him to give into his hate. And the fear, the structure that George has laid out in all the movies is coming to fruition now. And the only thing that's gonna save him is not his connection to the Force. It's not the powers he's learned. It's not all these things that are an advantage to him. That's gotten him to the table. But what saves Luke is his ability to look at all that and look at his father and say, no, I'm gonna throw away this weapon. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna let that go and be selfless. And he says, you know, I am a Jedi like my father before me, but what he's really saying, and why I connect so powerfully to it, is like he's saying, I love my father, and there's nothing you can do that's gonna change that. And the Emperor can't understand that connection. Why wouldn't you take this? I'm offering you power of the galaxy. Why wouldn't you take this? And Anakin then in that moment has to decide to be the father that he's never had. He has to give up all the power in the galaxy and save his son. And that's the selfless act that he does in return for his son. And that's what saves him in turn. So the son saved the father saved the son, and it works out perfectly. And I draw that line all the way from Phantom Menace to Jedi. That's the story of Star Wars.
So when he pops
Everything
the
else,
helmet, you're saying when he pops the helmet off in that moment was part of the
it's
fated arc.
It's all part of the fate. It's all part of like why it works and why we care. It's not about X-Wings. It's not about all the things we decorate Star Wars in. It's important. It's part of the genius of it. But we soulfully react like we don't just want an action movie. We want to feel uplifted. And Star Wars is an adventure that makes you feel good. You know, it makes me feel like, wow, I want to be a part of that. So that's what I always go back to with Star Wars, is this selfless act and this family dynamic, which is so important to George so important to the foundation of Star Wars. That's in us. And what I like about it is it is really saying there is a lot of hope out there, that we fundamentally want to be good people, that we can all be driven to do terrible things, but that we can persevere through selfless action. So George has this hopeful story, and it's something that he's reiterated most times I've seen him, after we've been making things without him, is remember to make these stories hopeful. Remember to give that to kids because they really need it. And so that's just something to keep in mind.
Oh, man, it just gets you every time,
No, man. Dave Filoni, he gets it better than anyone else on the planet.
Oh, yeah, he gets it more than me and you. Like he gets Star Wars in a whole new way. That, I mean, the guy is like Palpatine, the guy is like George's apprentice. I mean, not Palpatine's apprentice, George's apprentice, but
I picture that like Bob Iger and his apprentice, not George and his.
Right. I let that whole thing play out because even though majority of it actually wasn't about Maul, but I let the whole thing play out because Maul actually has a lot to do with it. Because if it wasn't for Maul, Qui-Gon wouldn't have died, and the whole story that we know wouldn't have played out the way it is, right? And there's and George just kind of said to Dave, well, we'll bring him back for Clone Wars. And that's why, Dave kind of brushes over his time in the Clone Wars, which we're actually going to get into. But he brushes over in the sense that until George, maybe bring it back, he was dead.
George made me bring him back.
Made me bring him back. Yeah. Cause at first he didn't think it was a good idea. But I love
bring back
how,
Darth Maul at gunpoint.
Right. Yeah. But I love how Maul is portrayed because like Dave finished off there, Star Wars is supposed to be a hopeful thing, right? Make you feel good, and kids really need that. And I love how Maul is not only visually the villain of the story in the Phantom Menace, but he's everything that embodies the opposite of everything that Star Wars stands for, or everything that the Jedi stand for. And he is like the physical embodiment of revenge and pain and suffering, and like the direct apprentice of evil, and literally from a young age, which is very uncommon for a Sith in the film so far to have been trained from such a young age. Like he's the only one out of Dooku, out of Anakin, Ben Solo, right. He's the only one that's been trained from such a young, innocent state, right? And I use the word innocent because of kind of what happens later, what's revealed about his childhood, and how he was actually taken from his mother, who turns out to be a prominent character in the Clone Wars. Yeah. So that kind of leads me to the Clone Wars, and you recently watched these episodes. I only took some bullet points down because I've actually seen them so many times. So I'll let you kind of take the reins on this one. But the first episode, we have a hint of him in Witches of the Mist. Did you watch that one by any chance, or did you skip over that one and go to the next one? I think
I assume he just mentioned, right?
Yeah, he was. He showed up in the crystal ball, in the smoke or something.
Yeah, okay. I did skip that one because I actually had just rewatched a bunch of those episodes anyway, so I did skip over that bit.
Okay,
where,
all right.
Savage Opress kind of escapes the duel with Asajj Ventress and Count Dooku, and he feels betrayed and abandoned. So he goes back to Mother Talzin, which is the leader of the Night Sisters, which is, I guess, like the queen, but she's like more of a witch, so a witch queen of Dathomir. And he goes to her, and he wants revenge, like every other character trained by the Sith. And she informs him that he actually has a brother that could help him, but he has to search him out, and we're seen through a crystal ball that is Darth Maul, but she doesn't actually reveal that until he gets to the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And then that we had to wait a little while when the show was actually coming out. Now, of course, with the chronological viewing order, it's placed a little bit differently. But that episode was actually season 3, episode 14. And then Maul himself shows up in season 4, episode 21, which is titled Brothers, which is when
a whole season later.
Which is when Savage finally comes face to face with his brother. And it's worth noting all these episodes that so far it's this story arc, Brothers, and then the following 2 episodes and the episode in season 3 were actually all written by Katie Lucas, which is George's daughter.
I saw her name, in the titles. I was very surprised by that. Figured,
she
like George's daughter is writing the story arc to bring back Darth Maul. Made me wonder if she's the one who wanted him back. George's like, well, I'm okay.
And
now we know that he forced Dave Filoni to do it, so I guess it was his daughter's wish.
Right. Well, she's just a fantastic writer because one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time, I'd say it's probably my favorite Star Wars book, is Dark Disciple, which is the 8 unproduced Clone Wars episodes, which finished off the story of Asajj Ventress, which are episodes that we'll never get. And so if you do watch the show, you never really get a conclusion to what happened to her character, but that's because it's in this book. And she has this story arc, which is just one of the most touching, kind of emotional Star Wars stories I've actually ever read in a novel. And I kind of supersede Lost Stars even with Dark Disciple, just because of the way that her past has been kind of architected together of being such a victim, I guess, of being used by people
she goes
in
through
power.
a lot of unfortunate circumstances.
And that's what kind of makes her end, I guess, so impactful. And she actually changes somebody's life along the way, which is a Jedi who is struggling to stay in the light, and that's Quinlan Vos, who's a mentioned character in the films. We never actually saw him in the films, but he was in a Clone Wars episode.
Actually, no, that's not true. He's in the background of the Phantom Menace on Tatooine.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that is true. Actually, yeah, he's got like a cameo. Yeah. That's so
what's funny is he was actually just a background character who wasn't a Jedi, and then I'm not sure the first story arc was. I think it was a comic. The guy just like was framing through the Phantom Menace, was like that guy, and made him into a Jedi. And that's how.
So good.
Yeah, that's how Quinlan Vos got his design.
And he's such a good character too.
Oh yeah. That being said, I kind of like the dark, moody version a lot more than the surfer dude we got from Clone Wars. But teach their own.
Kenobi.
Yeah.
Surf's up, dude. Hey, Commander, looking good. Yeah, I actually quite liked. I'm not too super attached to the Dark Horse early Clone Wars comics or anything, so I quite liked his portrayal, but I was taken by surprise because of course we all know him to be well, at least us fans who knew him from the old comic books and everything. It was a very different take on the character, but that's kind of the purpose of Dark Disciple. It brought that part of the character into the canon of the character that is the surfer dude and made him this super twisted, dark,
a lot more depth. Yeah.
And Dooku was like corrupting him and stuff like that. And that's when Ventress kind of comes into play in the story. And they had these 2 character arcs interwoven in this story. So not only does Dark Disciple tell that story of dark Quinlan Vos, but it also has this amazing ending to Ventress's life as well. But
and that was originally supposed to be a Clone Wars arc.
It was 8 episodes. Yeah. And those, the longer point that I was trying to make, I kind of got carried away, is those episodes were actually also written by Katie Lucas. So Katie Lucas has some of the best episodes in the whole show. Like,
let's not forget, she can ring up her dad and ask for tips or to look at her work whenever she wants. So there is that. Yeah. So I bet a lot of what she wrote was proofread by the master himself. So
Right.
that might help to why it's so good.
I'm sure George looked at the guy and was like, that's good.
Make them darker.
Yeah.
More tense.
Yeah. More intense. Yeah. This one's called Revenge. Nice. So Brothers introduces us to Spider Legs Darth Maul.
Yeah, that's right. It's made out of a bunch of garbage. He just collects around, controls with the Force, which is actually kind of cool.
Right. So he gets brought to Dathomir by Savage Opress, and that's where Mother Talzin heals him in a way and gives him a new set of artificial legs and refreshes his body and everything, and he's back.
And this isn't
point.
his final form, because at this point he has goat legs.
Right. He's got these Grievous style legs. And what's interesting about this style, which pays homage actually to a very old comic called Star Wars. I think it was Star Wars. Was it Visions or
I don't even
something
remember.
Like, it was
it was Dark Horse again, and they wrote some weird sequel comic to Darth Maul's story where he comes back with robot legs.
Yeah, and hunts down Obi-Wan.
In the desert. Obi-Wan. Yeah.
In the desert of Tatooine. Yeah. And what I love about that comic book that they still pay homage to it. Not only do they pay that homage to that duel between him and Maul in the desert, but they also took the aesthetic of the legs and just took those right out of the pages of the comic book and put them on Maul in the show. So I love that as well.
It was such a unique design, so it's pretty cool.
It is, yeah, it is for sure. And used battle droid parts from the battle that the Night Sisters lost to Grievous with, like that whole battle comes into play, and there's all these droid parts everywhere, and those are the droid parts that she uses, which is pretty crazy. So I love that
part. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of where the context of watching it and the whole length of the show comes into play, because then you get all these little bits and pieces that are like, oh, that's so interesting. But so Maul's back and starts plotting his revenge and everything like that, and then we get that episode, and we get the episode after, which is called Revival, which is season 5, episode 1. So following those, we get season 5, episode 14, 15 to 16, which is called Eminence, Shades of Reason, and the Lawless. And those episodes advance to the next phase of Maul's life, which he learns from his mistakes and tempers the fire of revenge inside him, kind of thing.
This is where we really get to know the new Maul from the Maul that we knew from Phantom Menace and the comics beforehand.
The one that was just a hothead, I'm going to go kill Jedi kind of thing. Yeah.
Just live to fulfill this bloodlust. Now he's almost taken a little bit on of his master, a little more Palpatine-esque, where he's got this long drawn out plot where he kind of withholds his draw or his need for vengeance and is able to temper it to pull off a lot more elaborate schemes and just pull off what he needs to actually fulfill a lot more murder.
It's actually interesting seeing his character evolve in that way, because of course he goes from that hothead person to now someone with an actual strategy in place.
Yeah, it used to be brute force, and now he's more intellect, which you would never expected from a character who was written to have 2 lines in a movie.
Yeah, and on top of all that stuff, he starts to begin his journey into what we then see in Solo by kind of looking at the underworld as a place to thrive, kind of thing. And this kind of calls back to those Marvel comics that we were talking about earlier, that he spent a lot of his biding of time in the underworld of Coruscant. And so he kind of knows the scum and villainy world really well. And in these episodes forges what's called the Shadow Collective, which is a unity of
the 3 largest crime syndicates in the Star Wars universe.
Yes. Which ones were they?
It's the Black Sun, Pike Syndicate, and the Hutts.
Right.
And so there's one episode where he just goes and collects the allegiance of all three crime syndicates, and I gotta tell you, I don't like how that goes. To me, it feels too easy. This guy just shows up, and these three massive crime syndicates. Could you imagine uniting the Russian mafia, the Italian mafia, and say like the what's the Chinese one, Triad, something like that? Can you imagine just within like 24 hours uniting all three?
It's impossible.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But here's the thing about that episode, is that because I know where you're going with that, and it's like I agree with you, but also it's like there is a scene where they kind of acknowledge that, and the Black Sun, they all stand up when he kind of approaches them with a deal, and they're like, "We are the Black Sun," and he's like, we do not take orders from you," or something like that, and they're all like these vicious looking dudes, and Savage Opress just takes his lightsaber, freaking hucks it down the table, like
murders all three,
everybody at the table, like this long table, and there's only one guy left, and then he
wasn't even their leader. He was like the right hand man.
Yeah, so that's kind of how he manages to do it, because like otherwise he wouldn't have been able to do it.
What's funny is you described that one, because that one I thought was still the least believable of all the others.
And then the Hutts, he burns a lot of them.
The Hutts I believe the most, because he actually chased them across multiple planets, and they tried to escape, and he still managed to get their loyalty. But back on Black Sun, why were there no guards in that room? Why didn't they just have everybody turn on them? Like, there's just like the three leaders are in this room with no protection whatsoever. They just walk in.
I think like,
they're over on like the fourth floor. Turn to your left. That's the leaders of the crime syndicate over there.
Right. I guess they totally underestimated him, right? And I think the Pikes, I think, were the only ones that were kind of easier to get on board with the whole thing. But the idea of the Shadow Collective is actually quite cool, because very little do we see these crime syndicates in collaboration. We always see them.
No, they're competitors.
Competing. Yeah. So in this arc, he tries to take over Mandalore, and he succeeds in a way, and gets the throne, and uses Satine as a trap for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you know, I'm skipping over a lot of events here, but
you're also missing the really important part. While he's doing this, it's a deal with the
Prime Minister Almec.
Well, he meets with him eventually, but it's actually Death Watch. He's got to deal with Death Watch to reclaim Mandalore. That's kind of the whole point of getting all these syndicates together.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So he makes a deal with Death Watch, and Death Watch is kind of this terrorist organization known for being a Mandalorian.
The original Mandalorian
culture.
And they're trying to reestablish the warrior culture to these pacifists. So you can kind of look at it as like, what's the name? Like Norway, because Norway, I think, is exactly what Mandalore is based on, because they were the Vikings, right? And now they are pacifists, right? They're very middle of the road. They're really socialist in a lot of the ways that they run their country, which is so counter opposite to what the original warrior culture was, where they would pillage other countries and steal all their stuff and return home. And that's how they survived for a very long time. And that's what Mandalore is now, where it used to be this warrior culture that is now all pacifists that don't want to be involved in a war. They just want peace. And then there's Death Watch, which is trying to reestablish the old Mandalorian or Viking ways.
And it's a big part of the whole plan, because of course with Death Watch's help, he's got a Mandalorian fighting force along with all these other crime syndicates and everything like that. And part of the plan to take over Mandalore is actually to pose is to use the syndicates as the bad guys and to use the Death Watch as the good guys, so to speak, and make them look like the heroes. So they make all these false kind of crimes happen and get the Death Watch to show up and save the day, sort of thing.
The term you're looking for is very frowned upon, but it's called false flags.
Okay,
so it's where you create an event to create a narrative to manipulate a situation to get what you want in the end, but you created the problem to offer the solution.
So basically, like Palpatine's whole plan.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of bad people use this to manipulate the public, right? It's kind of the idea of it,
right? So that's exactly what he does, and then eventually wins over the respect of the Mandalorian people in a way. But Death Watch's leader, who's supposed to be kind of like in charge of things, Maul kind of takes that rule back and basically he's like, no, I'm in charge. This is my plan. And whereas Death Watch thought that Maul was just gonna, I don't know, not just help them out. But yeah, like I guess they thought it would just be like I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of thing. But
at the beginning, they both had different things that they wanted that kind of aligned, so they could work together.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, but at this point, Maul's like, no, I'm superseding with power in my hands kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we could kind of see where that's going. And what's funny was both the Mandalorians and Maul had planned from the very beginning to betray each other, like all villains, right? It was like, yeah, we'll let him get what we need and then we'll turn on him. And Maul's like, don't worry, Savage. We'll just use them to our means.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And they do both betray each other in the end.
Yeah. And a fight breaks out between the lead of
Death Watch.
Death Watch Pre Vizsla.
Who is voiced by...
who is voiced by Jon Favreau. Yeah.
The director or head director of Mandalorian. Funny how it all comes full circle. Plays a Mandalorian, directs Mandalorians.
That's how he met Dave Filoni. Yeah. So and it's worth noting that Pre Vizsla's character at this point in time is the current ancestor and owner, which has been passed down to, of the Darksaber. Which originates from the Vizsla clan, which was one of like the first and only Mandalorian Jedi that ever existed, who made the lightsaber thousands of years before. But
I didn't realize he was of the Vizsla clan.
Yeah. This lightsaber was held by my ancestors during the fall of the Old Republic, or something. He was something like that. I think it was Tar Vizsla or something like that was the Jedi's name that made the lightsaber, or Tor Vizsla or something like that. But yeah, he was the only Mandalorian Jedi to have ever really existed and made that very unique lightsaber. So during the fall of the Old Republic, Mandalorian snuck into the Jedi Temple and stole it back after the Jedi died.
Yeah.
And so it's been passed down since then. And the ruler of Mandalore, which at this point, Pre Vizsla is in a government position anyways, but I guess he doesn't talk about the Darksaber up until he comes out as a terrorist, is the wielder and the current owner of the Darksaber. But in a I guess, what would you call that?
Yeah, that makes me wonder, though. This is maybe skipping ahead a bit, but it's not about Maul, so I think it's okay. Because as we find out in the Mandalorian series, the true ruler of Mandalore is the person who has the Darksaber. So that makes me think then the Vizsla family was supposed to be consistently the ruler. Like, when did it become the Darksaber that declares rulership over Mandalore? Like, when did that transition happen?
I don't know exactly. All I know is that if you challenge the owner of the Darksaber in battle and win, the Darksaber is yours. And technically, the Darksaber represents the ability to lead the planet.
Yeah, which we do see with Maul.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. To me, it's just strange that became a thing. What about forever before that. You know what I mean? I guess what we're led to believe in the Mandalorian series is that's just been this culture for forever, but it seems to be more within the Death Watch / Vizsla clan only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get, I guess when I think about it, I think of it, if nobody challenged the owner of the Darksaber, it might have been like a loyalty, or like a royal marriage thing, where it's like, oh, maybe someone from another clan marries in, and or something like that. Maybe it gets passed to them. Maybe that's how it could have potentially swapped clans at any point. But I would assume that maybe that's also not the case, just because the owner, the original maker of the Darksaber, was a Jedi. And
yeah, that's the part I'm trying to fit together. Maybe you have to wait for Dave Filoni, or we'll have to tweet Pablo for an answer on that.
Right.
It seems like history changed, but it's already been canonized. It's what it almost feels like.
I think the Vizsla clan it might be that they're like the dominant clan on Mandalore, kind of thing, the alpha clan, if you be, kind of thing.
So they were in power for a long time.
Yeah.
Like the pacifist state.
Yeah, and it makes sense because Pre Vizsla is also the leader of the Death Watch, which is trying to restore, that order, kind of thing. So,
restore our warrior ways.
Restore our warrior ways. Yeah. Man, if you gave him any other voice other than Jon Favreau, it would sound so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know how Favreau could sit in the recording booths and say lines like that.
We go reclaim our warrior ways.
Reclaim our warrior ways.
He pulls it off. He
does. Yeah. It's funny because his voice is slightly nerdy too. So
yeah, it is.
Makes it. Yeah, I don't know. It works. Anyway, back to Maul.
Okay, yeah. So he fights Pre Vizsla for the Darksaber and ruler of Mandalore. He wins, takes his head off, takes the Darksaber. Big internal rebellion of Death Watch. And
Death Watch is split because technically how Mandalore, their original customs were, or if you beat the leader, all of everyone who's under that needs to now follow the new leader who won the duel. But they're split because Maul isn't Mandalorian.
Yeah. So Bo-Katan is like, no outsider will ever rule Mandalore.
Exactly. And so Death Watch splits, and half follow her, Bo-Katan, and half follow Maul.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that at this point, Maul has killed Satine, which is a very good friend, if not possible previous lover of Obi-Wan. And
love interest.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan is helped by Bo-Katan to escape the planet, and she basically says, okay, tell your Republic what happened here. Like, this is not, like, things are not looking good for Mandalore, right? And so that's kind of where that story arc ends. But at the very end of that arc, what I love about this arc is that it ends off with Palpatine showing up on Mandalore, wielding 2 lightsabers, killing Savage Opress, and taking Maul captive, and saying, like, he basically comes in and says, like, dude, you're wrecking my plans. Like, you're actually like doing something to take away from what I'm building towards, and it's not okay. I don't care if you're alive. I don't care what you say, in the sense of, because he tries to make it sound as if he was doing it all for Palpatine when he knows he's not. And he's like, yeah, you're no longer my apprentice. And so that's kind of where
what's funny is after Maul gets beat, he even gets a little desperate. It was like, oh, I collected all of these things for you.
Yeah exactly. So and that's where,
like, I have a new apprentice.
And you are no longer my apprentice. And that's where that story ends in season 5 for the time being, up until it gets picked up in the Son of Dathomir comic book. All right, yeah. So the next thing up is the Son of Dathomir miniseries, which was unproduced Clone Wars episodes because because Disney. And
let's be honest here, that's exactly what it was, and there's a lot of fan outcry.
So it was a part of a project called Clone Wars Legacy. And this is also the same project that the unfinished episode story reels for the Utapau arc were released, and the Dark Disciple novel also came out under this label as well. Legacy, not to be confused with Legends, which is non-canon stuff. Legacy is just, it's like to continue something on after it's already gone. 4 episodes adapted, 4 comic issues. It was the last ones that Dark Horse Comics did. And we start off with Maul in captivity. It resolves the cliffhanger from the Lawless. Maul is kept in captivity from Palpatine and Dooku, and then his elite Mando troops break him out of this prison, which is Stygian. It's called the Stygian secret prison or something, which is later pops up in Star Wars Rebels in the 5th episode when Kanan and Ezra go to try and rescue Luminara Unduli, who turns out to actually be dead, but it's a trap that the Inquisitor lures them into. So that place originates here in this comic book, or in this episode, I guess I should call it. And Grievous, so he gets out. Grievous goes hunting for Maul on a planet called Zanbar, and his droids just decimate Maul's forces. All right, just like completely obliterate them. And Dooku and Maul's plan is actually to have this happen, just so that they break Maul's spirits down to the bone. Like they want him they want him dead, but they also want him just powerless, kind of thing. That's the whole goal of it.
And these are Mandalorians that he's attacking?
So Grievous and his army of droids are attacking Maul and his army of Mando troops, basically. So they wreck a lot of what he's got going on.
Yeah, which is actually really crazy.
Yeah. And that included... Yeah.
Mandalorians should be way more trained than battle droids.
Right, yeah. But at the end of the battle, Grievous says that the losses were extensive on his end too. But of course, droids are expendable, right? And many people died on the Pikes and the Black Sun as well. And the alliance starts to fracture at this point. Mother Talzin, turns out, resides in Maul's body, because at this point in time, she's actually she's losing her life force in a way. She's losing the ability to maintain a physical body, kind of thing.
Yeah, I was trying to remember this part in the Clone Wars arc. This was after... Did Grievous go and try to kill her, and then she went into hiding?
So she basically disappears after Grievous fights all the Night Sisters and decimates the Night Sisters on Dathomir, and she kind of disappears and lingers in this like ghosty form, where she's like not a physical person anymore. She can like teleport through the forest, different areas, and so she actually, to stay alive, she has to harness onto Maul's body, kind of like a parasite almost, and lives inside him, sort of thing. So for a long time now, I guess Palpatine and Dooku have been trying to figure out a plan to lure Talzin out into the open so that they can kill her, because she's actually a threat, and then make sure that Maul is rendered powerless while they achieve this goal. So that's the whole point of this plan, and it's not until around after this battle that it's revealed to Grievous that that's what the plan is. And so then Maul and his forces kind of get away, what forces he has left, guiding his path. Talzin kind of takes him, is guiding him through her magic and stuff like that. Grievous tracks Maul to Ord Mantell. Maul and his forces fight a trap that is laid out, and capture. He lays a trap out for Grievous, that is, and he captures Dooku and Grievous, which is like, this is like the turning point, and you think that Maul actually might get the upper hand. Meanwhile, the Jedi are lured into the conflict by the Chancellor, who begins to allows them to start investigating this whole thing, because of course he wants to draw the Jedi into more mess. And Maul and Talzin reveal to Dooku that Palpatine actually betrayed them both, and they try to ally with him, and they reveal that Maul is actually Talzin's son, which is something that I kind of brought up earlier, and something that actually has to do with how Maul is actually a bit of a tragic character, in a sense that he was taken as a young child and trained from a very young age to
Yeah, which was interesting because I actually read a little bit into this more in depth, I think today. And what happened was Palpatine went to Mother Talzin to try to learn some of her Force capabilities and try to learn from her as a Sith master.
Yeah.
And he then betrayed her and stole Maul to take on as an apprentice.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interestingly enough, Dooku also had an alliance with Talzin at one point to learn. They collaborated with different types of Force magic. So both Palpatine and Dooku had this pre-existing relationship with Talzin in one way or another.
Yeah. Plus, Dooku went to her to get an apprentice, which was Savage Opress.
Yeah, exactly. They tell Dooku though that Palpatine is going to betray them one day, and I wrote this down because it's something that actually happens. And Palpatine gets Anakin to kill Dooku, and I don't think Dooku ever saw that moment coming. Like, even though he knows the ways of the Sith, that the Sith betray each other, I think he thought that it would go differently for him, and he doesn't expect it. Like, that moment in Revenge of the Sith, you see the surprise on his face. Yeah. So.
Yeah, honestly, he does seem very caught off guard, and which is even more surprising because in that moment, he's just lost his hands, which make him quite useless, because the two things that he had going for him as a Sith were he's a very good duelist, which the way he fought, it was more of a fencing, which is all in the wrist and the hands. And he just lost his hands. And he's one of the few Sith that could use Force lightning, which you also need your hands, which is why Darth Vader can't do it. So
right,
he's rendered himself useless, and yet he's still surprised when Palpatine decides to execute him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I never thought of that. But it's here that that Dooku is kind of warned by Talzin, saying like, "Hey, Palpatine betrayed Maul. He used Maul, just like what Dave Filoni was saying. Like, he used Maul as a weapon, and when that weapon was expired, he didn't fight to get him back. Like, he just let him die and do his own thing." And Talzin was also betrayed, and he said, "Dooku, okay, you're gonna get the knife in the back one day." And so Dooku temporarily aligns with Maul to fight past the Jedi who now show up and escape on a ship that they're on. And Dooku actually kills Master Tipley, who is like this pink, I forget the alien's name, but her and her sister was the one that was killed by Top the Clone in season 6.
Yeah, with the weird underwater wavy hair.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So yeah. So that happens, and they allow the Jedi to believe that Maul and Dooku are actually master and apprentice, all part of Palpatine's deception, sending the Jedi in to make Dooku look like the master and Maul look like the new apprentice kind of thing. So they're kind of off the trail of like Palpatine at this point, who, if they suspected anything at all, now that's like, oh, it's master and apprentice. There we go. It's our two suspects right there. So, once again, him toying with the whole, using the war to kind of toy with the Jedi's heads. Maul takes Dooku to Dathomir, where Talzin tries to use Dooku as a vessel to come back to the living realm. And Grievous shows up with Palpatine in the process, fights Maul, and at this point, a possessed Dooku, which like Talzin is like inside his body, and they extract Talzin via Sith lightning. Grievous actually kills Talzin as she's trying to defend through the Force. Like they got like a lightning duel going on, her and Palpatine, and Grievous comes up and just kills her as she's like doing it, which is pretty crazy. But Maul actually gets.
It's been a while since I've seen this fight.
It's awesome. I really wish that this ended up in an episode. But Maul actually gets away, having lost everything, including his mother, die. And with what little Mandalorian forces he has left, it's left with him going back to Mandalore with that kind of ragtag group of Mandalorians that are loyal to him still. And that's all he has. He's got no apprentice, no mother, no master who wants him. He's got nothing, like no alliance with the Pikes and the Black Sun. That whole thing with the Hutts and everything falls apart at this point in time in the story. and he's got nothing left. So he heads back to Mandalore to live in on that world, in the underworld.
Or as a king, because he's still technically the leader.
Yeah, and that's kind of where that story is left off, which is when, and then we flash forward now to season 7 finale.
Yeah, so there's a big time gap where we have no idea what the heck's going on because Disney canceled it.
Well, now of course there's some episodes, but at least it's something. But we're definitely not enough.
We don't have a finale though.
This though, the Son of Dathomir comic was all the episodes that Maul was supposed to be in before the season 7 finale. Yeah.
So was season 7 then what we're about to go over? Was that
the finale
pre-written as well, or did they rewrite it to fit Maul in?
No, that was all pre-written. So actually they had 2 seasons pre-written. There was one of the writers on the team, I think his name was Brent Friedman. He tweeted out at some point quite a couple of years ago, there was originally supposed to be 8 seasons of the Clone Wars. So aside from the adapted episodes between Dark Disciple, Son of Dathomir, the released story reels, some of the episode ideas, or the episode, not the episode titles, but like some of the episode arcs that we know about from some of the celebrations that Dave Filoni's like talked about them. Like there was one where Yoda goes to Kashyyyk before he does in episode 3. And there's like one about Boba and Cad Bane, the bounty hunter. And there was a couple more like kind of like that. And so aside from those ones, there's an unaccounted for like roughly 20 to 25 episodes in that ballpark that we have no idea.
They should do
like what they're
they
about.
should release shorts, like a live action short of some of these stories that were just a couple arcs.
They should. And cool. Honestly, like, I mean, I'm stoked that we're getting Bad Batch, but I would have been even more stoked to have more Clone Wars, like just to finish the show. Like that would have been great. But
yeah, I really, even if it's just the Yoda one and Cad Bane and Boba Fett, I would love to see that as like maybe a 3-part mini series.
Yeah, make some like movies, like make the arcs into movies and have them on Disney Plus. Like they could totally get away with that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially just do like TV movies. Doesn't need to be feature length. Just be hour and a half or whatever. That'd be great.
Yeah, and then just stick him in that already messed up chronological viewing order anyway, right? Like,
It's true.
All right, so take it away with season 7.
Yeah, so we finally got to figure out what happened to Maul towards the end of the Clone Wars, because he just kind of vanished. And what happens is Ahsoka gets sent back to Mandalore with some of the 501st troopers, and she actually doesn't know that Maul's there. She's there just trying to push out the Death Watch, as well as reclaim the peaceful order, or the peaceful rulership that was in control of Mandalore before Death Watch took over. And she actually falls into a trap and meets Maul. And of course, at that point, she's supposed to, she needs to get rid of Maul, right? Sith Lord. So she's chasing him down. And they end up in a confrontation where the Death Watch and the 501st troopers are at full war, and she needs to come to a duel with Maul. Sorry, you might need to cut this part out. I'm like also reading.
No worries. I know what I remember the moment that you're talking about. It's such a cinematic moment on screen. And I remember all the fighting going on outside the throne room's windows, which is when she and Maul finally have their duel and stuff.
It's so well set up. Yeah. The lighting and everything. Yeah. And a really important point comes out just before they fight is they actually start to talk, and Maul points out that he's been getting a lot of visions of what's been happening in the future. Mm-hmm. And he is seeing what essentially is Darth Vader. He sees that Anakin is going to fall to the dark side and that his master is going to have this new apprentice. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment where Ahsoka and Darth Maul actually almost team up to overthrow the Sith, because they both think that they can work together to get Palpatine. But Maul goes a little bit too far in what he's saying and shares that it's Anakin that's going to turn on the Jedi, and Ahsoka at this point in her storyline just can't believe that.
Yeah.
She can't believe that's going to happen. So she thinks that Maul must be manipulating her, just lying to her. So she at the last moment before they work together, turns on him and forces them to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And she does succeed in beating him in a long, drawn-out fight, and they capture him. Instead of executing him, they capture him, and they take him onto the 501st ship, which this is where we find it taking place during Order 66, which is why Anakin doesn't have his full legion. And we then are actually go through the Order 66 itself, where all the clones turn on Ahsoka on the ship, and she then uses Maul as an escape route and a distraction so she can try to get out with Rex, who she's able to coax out of the mind control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that's I mean, there's so much more beyond on the Clone Wars end and the Ahsoka side of things, but yeah, that's pretty much Maul's story. Like he steals that ship on the Republic warship and gets away and blasts off into hyperspace.
Yeah, he takes what is essentially the last ship left too.
Yeah.
Ahsoka was prepping it and getting ready to take off, and then Maul just at the last second swoops in and steals it and leaves them in this crashing ship that's about to blow up, being attacked by all these mind-controlled troopers.
Yeah, it's a crazy moment because, of course, many of us who've seen Star Wars, Solo, A Star Wars Story, or Rebels, like obviously you know that he lives, but you know, just to watch it play out like that, I was still so tense in my seat the first time I watched it. I was like, what's gonna happen? I don't know how this.
It was really
it's like I don't know how this ends, right? And
at this point, we didn't even know what was gonna happen to Ahsoka, so she could have died, and it wouldn't have affected anything.
Well,
wait, no, that's not true. We saw her Rebels.
We saw her Rebels and stuff, but
that could have been a clone.
The Clone Wars, everybody. No, it's just what I'm saying is like it's just a tense moment regardless, because even though you do know what's going to happen, it's just one of those things. It's like, how is it going to play out? And Maul is, you know, he's such a big part of that final moment of the Clone Wars, in such a big part of Ahsoka's life now, in a way that he's such a big part of Obi-Wan's life, from having this super long rivalry between the two, and Maul's lust for revenge on Obi-Wan, not only taking his legs and stuff, but losing that fight and eventually losing his places.
And it's really the driving force of Maul at this point, is to just kill Obi-Wan. He doesn't really care about anything else.
At this point.
Doesn't care about money, power. He just wants revenge of one person.
Right, yeah. He doesn't seem to ever get it, does he?
No.
So we flash forward quite a few years to Solo, A Star Wars Story, which takes place around 5 to 7-ish years. I think it's around there. After Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, I always thought it was closer to New Hope.
No, he's it's, you know what, I should know this. I feel like I did know it, and now I'm just blanking on it. How long after Sith? I probably shouldn't be Googling this, but so it takes place roughly around 11 to 14 years before A New Hope. So so pretty much exactly what I said. Because there's a 19-year gap between those two movies, so around 10 years, you know, or just before. That's
a long time for Maul to just be hiding in the shadows.
Yeah, just chilling. But he hasn't been doing nothing, because at the very end of Solo: A Star Wars Story, we see a brief appearance of Maul, who shows up on a hologram, and it's revealed that he's in fact the leader of a new criminal organization called Crimson Dawn. And this story is never concluded. Okay, we're still waiting on what happens to Crimson Dawn. But that's all I have to say about that story. It's a very brief appearance, and I loved seeing it. And his story actually picks up in the next animated series, Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah, before we move on too far, though, like that really came out of left field, that reveal.
Right.
And I'm now probably as far as like what's left, I guess this is the only thing that is left. So I'm quite curious to what they're going to do to fill in this gap, because he's no longer connected to the Mandalorians, and they kind of think that he's betrayed them, essentially. We kind of learned that from Bo-Katan. I assume what's left after the Empire wiped them all out is all sided with her. And he no longer has his crime syndicate of all of them together. So I guess he created a new competing one. I don't know. Maybe he took over Black Sun and like relabeled it or something.
Maybe.
I mean, we have no idea.
Right. Yeah. That's honestly one of my biggest questions. Aside from what kind of details came out of that Republic occupancy of Mandalore in the finale of the Clone Wars, but yeah, just as far as Maul's concerned, I mean, like what happened with in those couple of years, like where did Crimson Dawn come from? Like how did he set it up? Like all the details on that. Yeah. Those are all never revealed, not even in Star Wars Rebels. Star Wars Rebels picks up years after Crimson Dawn's not even a thing anymore. Crimson Dawn's not even mentioned in Star Wars Rebels. It's because Rebels is actually a series that began and concluded before Solo: A Star Wars Story was even made.
Wonder if it got snuffed out again by Palpatine, just like he did with the Syndicate.
Maybe. I mean, it's a story obviously that we have yet to see, and I know there's a lot of people petitioning for a sequel to Solo, and I actually quite liked Solo: A Star Wars Story. I mean,
there'll be a story where we find out Palpatine sent Vader to deal with it, and we'll finally get a Darth Maul, Darth Vader duel.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
I mean, I guess we're about to get into it, but maybe I should save it to when we're actually talking about it later at Rebels. But Dave Filoni did mention that there's a very good chance where they could have had Darth Maul and Darth Vader duel, but he opted not to do that because of other characters.
Yeah, that's referring to one of the episodes that Maul's in Rebels, which focuses in on Ahsoka's story a little more, and her conflict with Vader. But yeah, let's get into Rebels here. How about do you want to take the first couple episodes and then I'll finish off wherever you want to stop?
Sure, I'll just do half then. So Maul eventually travels to Malachor in search of an ancient weapon, and his ship is crashed there, leaving him trapped there for years without contact of the galaxy, which I always thought was very interesting because we meet Maul underground, under the surface layer of this planet, and he's kind of tricks Ezra, where he's like this kind of old, kind of like wizened, lost, weird character. Like the best way I can describe it is if you've seen the old Aladdin movies, and in the animated one, and Aladdin gets imprisoned, and there's like that weird old man who's just been there forever.
Yeah.
Which we find out later is Jafar, which actually is Darth. They just stole that storyline.
Dude, they took Aladdin.
It's just the same
They took Aladdin and just transformed that into Star Wars Rebels.
Ezra is Aladdin and Jafar is Darth Maul.
It's so true, man. It's so true.
I just realized that right now because we always make fun of Ezra being Aladdin because he's the street rat turned Jedi, right? So
street rat.
Take that, street rat.
I mean, it was on Mandalorian after show that we started singing Arabian Nights.
Arabian Nights. Yeah. Man, I did not realize that at all right now. That really is just Jafar. Yeah, it's like this person pretending to be an old man who's helpless.
And he calls himself Old Master. Like that's how he refers himself to. Yeah.
Yeah. Ezra Bridger, who is manipulated into helping him retrieve the Sith holocron along the brief adventure where Maul also plants seeds of the dark side in Ezra and refers to himself as the Old Master. Yeah. Wow, there's we might have to tweet that out to Pablo or Dave Filoni.
Hey, we got Jafar, we got Disney. Aladdin here.
That's right.
You getting some tips from Bob Iger?
Yeah. Oh man, maybe for Star Wars Celebration we should just go as Aladdin and Jafar instead of like Darth
we'll mix
Maul.
it up, like do it like Aladdin and Jafar with lightsabers.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. Yeah, it's Maul planting seeds in Ezra is interesting. It's an interesting part of Star Wars Rebels because not only does it subject Ezra now to the dark side and to an actual like previous Sith, but his character is exposed to something that he then struggles with for the next following couple seasons. Like these seeds of the dark side follow Ezra into the final season of Star Wars Rebels. Yeah.
He's kind of like he's had this taste of using his anger for power. Yeah. And so he realized that there is a strength there. Yeah. And he's always so desperate to save his friends at all costs that if he doesn't feel that he's strong enough using the light side of the Force, he will use the dark side to get the ends to his means by any means necessary, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we also find the Inquisitors here on Malachor, which we should talk about the fact that it's called Malachor because the Sith planet was always originally Korriban.
Oh, you're thinking of Moraband. Which is
it's Korriban.
Yeah, Korriban / Moraband is another. It's another planet.
Malachor.
So Malachor is a different planet, which was just a planet that had this ancient war between Jedi and Sith, and there's a big Sith temple there, which had a super weapon inside it, and somehow all these people died on the planet and everything like that. And of course, it's worth mentioning the same planet that flashed back in the first Marvel comic that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. Yeah, how Palpatine brought him there to have the vision. So it's only natural that I'm assuming that Crimson Dawn at this point is somehow taken from him or gone or whatever, and he's come to the only place that he believes that there's a sanctioned place for him to gain power once again, and this is the super weapon or something inside the holocron inside the Sith temple.
The one thing though is I find it hard to believe that Palpatine wouldn't have got that, because now that we know Palpatine knows of this planet and he took Maul here, why wouldn't he have gotten the holocron out himself?
It's a good point. I honestly don't know. Like it's possible that maybe he left it there intentionally, or in planning to come back someday. I mean, he's Palpatine. He owns the galaxy. He probably feels like if he leaves something somewhere, it's going to be a safe place. I don't think he felt like as if the Jedi would show up there at any point in time. So he was like, yeah, whatever. I'll just leave it here. But
right. And that being said, I think the Inquisitors try to get the holocron from them. So
yeah,
they might be tasked to do that as well.
And Maul actually, I think he needs Ezra's help to actually get the holocron in the first place. So it's
that's right. It's the rule of two is needed to get into the temple. Mm-hmm. So they have it set up where there's kind of these giant stone doorways that can only be lifted through the Force, and they're so heavy that a Force user can only ever lift one at a time, and you have to lift one and then the next, and then both go under the second one and let down the first one so you can open the third one and then continue on. So it's kind of a back and forth master and apprentice lifting the doors to get through. That being said, I don't know why several Jedi couldn't just go in and do it, but
right. So many of these like little story plot holes.
Loopholes. Yeah. But that was the idea. There can only be two, master and apprentice. So that's why Maul couldn't do it himself. So he actually needs to use Ezra to get through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Inquisitors track Maul and the Jedi here, which is Malachor, while Ahsoka, Kanan were reluctant to trust Maul when they ran into him. With the help of the four of them force the Inquisitors to retreat. Maul kills the seventh sister and helps Ahsoka find the fifth brother. This is also, unfortunately, where we learn of helicopter lightsabers.
Yeah, totally. Reason for the helicopter lightsabers was pretty stupid.
Pablo admitted that the only reason they did that is they needed an excuse to get the Inquisitors from one side of the game map to the other. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I would have been happy
would've-
with it. They just cut it and boom, they show up.
Exactly. They're just there.
Yeah.
They're villains. They can just appear. Though I think they also tried to explain the lightsabers a little better, that they don't work by the blades having lift. I guess the lightsabers, because of kind of that disc shape and they spin, they have like repulsors or like the anti-grav things on them, I guess is how they work.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people had a lot of problems with that, so they needed to explain it. So Maul betrays the Jedi, striking Kanan blind, duels Ahsoka. She leaves him though to fight Vader, and Maul takes a fall after Kanan beats him. He survives and makes off with an Inquisitor ship once again. His planet ruins. And at this point, he's kind of considers Ezra to be his new apprentice, and he keeps bringing that up, mocking Kanan to his face, like, me and my apprentice will take this lift. Yeah. You two can go around to the far side while they're working together. Which I thought was pretty funny. Just like super arrogant.
Yeah. So once again, like you said, like he betrays the Jedi, and I love how Ahsoka is once again faced with Maul, like in a fight. Like there's the second fight that they've now had to have, and she chooses to go and kind of save Ezra and leaves Kanan to deal with Maul, and you know, she goes off to fight Vader. Has that confrontation, which is extremely.
And this is after Maul had already thought Kanan was rendered useless by blinding him.
Yeah.
With his lightsaber, and thought he was out for the fight, and then Kanan comes back
just
and he
samurais him off the edge.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was so good.
It was a good move.
It was like such a karate, like Mr. Miyagi kind of like okay, he's.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to explain it. Like Maul comes in overconfident, and then Kanan moves like 3 times and throws him off a cliff.
Yeah, so good, right? And so he falls, you know, and he survives, of course. So we pick up the story months later, and Maul has actually captured Hera and the crew and exchanges them for the holocrons, which at this point Ezra has both. I think he has both, or I think he has either both, or he has just the light side one, or whatever the case is. He makes an exchange with them to combine the dark and the light side holocrons to reveal secrets in the Force.
Maul shows up and he captures their ship, and he searches the ship and finds the Jedi holocron in Kanan's bedroom.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah.
So they combine, and what I love about it is that they combine these and reveal secrets in the Force by combining the light and the dark side. I always thought that was kind of a cool concept.
That is really interesting, but it makes me wonder who figured it out, right? Like I don't know what any Sith that would have Jedi holocrons or Jedi that would have Sith holocrons.
It's something that surprises me about Maul's character is that he actually knows this stuff. And once again, I'm reminded just how much Maul was supposed to be the original Sith apprentice. Yeah. So, I mean, he spent more time with Palpatine than pretty much anyone else other than Vader.
That's true. Would have been nearly 20 years, if not more.
Yeah. So the ritual links Maul and Ezra's mind in the Force, but at this point, the secrets that's been revealed to him, Maul figures out that Obi-Wan's actually alive somewhere. And he's obsessed with finding it because that's all he has. He doesn't have anything left. He's got no military, no nothing. He's got no like I said before, the whole long list. Like he's out for his sole purpose of living at this point is seeking revenge on Obi-Wan, and that's it. And so
what's funny is when they first are trying to do the holocron thing, he doesn't even know if Obi-Wan's alive. He's just looking for a reason to live.
Right. Yeah. He's
like he has nothing.
He's doing whatever. Yeah.
And it coincidentally works out because Ezra is looking for a way to destroy the Sith, and Maul is looking for a purpose, and they're both revealed a desert planet with twin suns, and they're both are led to Obi-Wan, who's the answer to both of their questions.
Yeah, that's actually like the best way to kind of express through that stuff, because Ezra thinks Obi-Wan is not only the perfect recruit to help the Rebel Alliance, but I mean, you know, it's the whole twin sons thing. It's such an iconic nod to that original kind of moment of like Luke looking off into the twin suns, it kind of represents A New Hope in general, right? And it also represents Anakin's origin and like where he comes from and that whole lineage. And Obi-Wan is there protecting Luke. And so he obviously declines the offer to join the rebellion. But I forget the details on that conversation that he has with Ezra, but he basically sends Ezra away. And Maul shows up in the desert
he actually tracked Ezra.
Yeah.
And Ezra led Maul to Obi-Wan.
And the final...
Yeah, it was kind of funny because Obi-Wan points that out. It's like, he says essentially, you were on the right track, you were doing what you were supposed to, but instead you led him here.
Yeah. Right. And it's an interesting thing that happens here because of course Obi-Wan and Maul known each other for years at this point, and Rebels takes place about 5 years before A New Hope, and this episode, it being towards the end of the show, actually takes place even less than 5 years. And the final duel occurs, and in typical samurai fashion, Maul is killed very swiftly and quick. And at first I wasn't sure about this death scene, but after hearing Dave Filoni talk about it, it kind of made more sense. And upon further analyzation,
you have to look deeply into it. You realize there's a lot of depth, even though the whole fight lasts 10 to 15 seconds. They both essentially do one move and the fight is over and Maul is dead.
Right. Actually, you know what? Let's just watch it here because there's some interesting dialogue that is brought up, which would be interesting to talk about. So,
because this is really the culmination of all of Darth Maul's plot, like his storyline. Like this is everything that he's been driven to and from.
Right.
It from when we first met him in Phantom Menace, where he kills Qui-Gon and he loses to Obi-Wan, the rest of his life is trying to make up that one mistake. His entire life leads up to this moment.
Yeah. The way that Dave puts it is, or Sam Witwer even puts it, is Maul is always trying to push this boulder up a hill and it just keeps rolling back down on him again. And every time he tries to get close to the top of the hill, it just gets worse, So yeah, here's the clip of Maul versus Obi-Wan.
Look what has become of you. A rat in the desert.
Look what I have risen above.
I have come to kill you, but perhaps it's worse to leave you here, festering in your squalor.
If you define yourself by your power to take life, your desire to dominate, to possess, then you have nothing.
And what do you have? Why come to this place? Not simply to hide. Oh, you have a purpose here. Perhaps you are protecting something? No. Protecting someone. Tell me, is it the chosen one?
He is.
He will avenge us.
There's something very very sad about his final moment there, because at that last kind of moment, it's clear that he's been a victim himself his whole life of not only just constantly failing and been a victim of his own lust for revenge, but I mean, he's clearly been used by a Dark Lord that he hates.
Yeah, he was a pawn.
Yeah, he was a pawn.
Yeah, he was a pawn in this giant scheme that Palpatine created. So he was manipulated from a child. I think he starts to realize that as he gets older, that he may not have went down this path of the dark side if he wasn't kidnapped by a Sith Lord and manipulated to be a pawn in this giant war, and he could have had a better life.
Yeah, simply put. I love a few things about that fight scene.
Stuff that I know you're going to point out, but you do not get it the first time. You have to watch it over and over again and slowly peel back layers, and you start to realize the actual depth that is in this 5-second fight.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, the fact that it takes place on Tatooine, this is the place that he revealed himself to the Jedi. This is the final moment of his life, and he's revealing himself finally to Obi-Wan after all these years. And it's very, like, he acknowledges that they're in this place. You know, he's like, why have you come to this place?
It's full circle.
Yeah, it's come full circle. Exactly. And
it kind of rhymes.
It does. And when they take out their lightsabers and make their stance, Obi-Wan has his classic prequel sort of like, you know, hello there kind of move. And then he actually changes positions over the shoulder to assume how Qui-Gon's. Yeah.
And he uses Qui-Gon's battle stance.
Yeah. And then Maul then goes to try and kill Obi-Wan in the way that he actually did with Qui-Gon, where he tries to butt his arms up with the hilt of his lightsaber and then stick him through the stomach. But
stab him in the gut.
But Obi-Wan sees that coming and actually swipes down and cleaves him in. Like, after 2 hits of the lightsaber, he's done.
He cleaves
right through the hilt, and
he just cleaves through the middle of the double-bladed saber. That's right. It goes right into the Maul's gut.
It's so good, man. Like after all the fights that they've had, like, it's just, you know, the shortest fights. It's totally reminiscent of all the samurai duels that have happened through many of the inspired movies that you know, the ones that inspired George, you know, to make Star Wars in the first place. So there's so many kind of levels of depth to the fight there.
And Dave kind of talked about this at one point, where he said, when he was explaining this fight specifically, he talks about the old samurai, you know, they're not as capable as they once were as far as like physical, like, prowess, but they're very wizened and experienced, where they don't need a lot of attack or strength or agility. The whole fight is done in 1 or 2 moves, and that's it, because they're all just so talented and they've honed their skills so much. Yeah. And Dave said he really wanted to emphasize that, and you can kind of see that in Obi-Wan's face a little bit, where he, you know, defaults to his regular attack, and then he takes a moment to think about the situation and his enemy, and he adjusts his fighting style according to the person who he's fighting.
Yeah.
So instead of what he's comfortable with, he actually switches, and you could once you realize what's going on, you realize he switches to that stance to goad Maul in. Because if Maul just reacts the way he's been trained to without thinking about what Obi-Wan's doing, he's going to go to that first attack that he used on Qui-Gon. And it's exactly what he did, which was played directly into what Obi-Wan was setting up and gets rid of him in one shot.
Yeah. And you know, it's like Dave said, like, these fights, whether they're super epic or not, I mean, like, they have to mean something, right? And that's always kind of what makes a good fight, is like a reason behind the fight. And so one of the things I love about how they're facing off the way that they do is that is that Maul goes to kill Obi-Wan in an artful fashion, as to for his own satisfaction, knowing that he killed Obi-Wan the same way that he killed Obi-Wan's master. And this is the exact same mentality that Anakin has when he goes to attack Obi-Wan on Mustafar. He thinks that he can do better than what Obi-Wan did to kill Maul back in Phantom Menace. And so Anakin gets, Obi-Wan gets the better of him in the sense that he's actually not as powerful as he thinks he is. But Anakin thinks he can actually pull off what Obi-Wan did and flip over his enemy to take out Obi-Wan the same way that Obi-Wan's big kind of moment happened. Yeah, but he fails at it. And just the same way that Maul fails in this moment as well. It's like, it seems to me that anytime someone thinks they can get the better of Obi-Wan, they don't make it happen. Or Obi-Wan doesn't let it happen. Yeah. So that's something else.
He's always one move ahead.
Yeah, and that's something else that I love. And the fastest chess games. I mean, I just watched the Queen's Gambit, excellent series, and I found chess is like a battle between two opponents, right? And it's like, it's not exactly like a samurai fight, but the concept is the same. It's like you're fighting somebody with a strategy, and they have a certain artful way of going about that. But the most skillful players can defeat their opponent very quickly. And it doesn't, the most grand epic fights, it's not going to mean that chess battle is going to last like a long time. Like sometimes if one person is much better than the other, it's just going to go quick. Right. And in the same way that this lightsaber duel, it's like, they're both really good, but they both know each other so well. And they both have an idea as to how the other person fights, but Obi-Wan is just better. And so he just cleans house as quickly as Maul allows him to by going forward with his plan of trying to kill him the way he did with Qui-Gon. But I always found it was really interesting. Just the way the fight plays out is just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And something that kind of dawned on me now as we're talking about this is there's another layer to it that Dave did, and he managed to split the gap or fill in the blank between the Obi-Wan we know from Revenge of the Sith with his fancy flips and quick attacks to the Obi-Wan we know from A New Hope, where he's kind of this feeble old man. Was just it looks like he's desperately holding off Darth Vader, right? Barely moving this lightsaber around. And we kind of get the Obi-Wan now, as we're learning that in this episode of Rebels where he fights Maul. It's not that he's old and he's feeble. It's that he's wizened, and his strikes and his blocks are more acute, right? He doesn't need to move as much. Yeah. Because he's just more experienced of a fighter. He's probably been practicing this whole time while he's been on Palpatine, on Tatooine. Slip the tongue there.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need the crazy acrobatics that he once did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how these animated shows can do that, just take a character and fill in the gaps, so to speak. So it's a very different kind of Obi-Wan from episode 3 to episode 4. It's like, wow, what happened?
Yeah, there's a huge difference. Yeah. And a lot of people say that he's just old now, right? But we see Yoda, who's in Revenge of the Sith, he's like this old, crippled old frog, and he throws his cane aside and is doing backflips over too.
Yeah. Well, I think he just ages better.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, the idea is you lean on the Force, not your body.
Yeah. That's it's true. Yeah. That's kind of the whole mentality of the Jedi and the first place. It's just you let the Force guide you kind of thing. So one question that kind of lingers after all this stuff, Maul's dead and all that stuff, is what happened to the Darksaber. A lot of people might be wondering, how did it end up where it did with Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian? Well, there's a small piece of the puzzle that kind of fits in with the rest of Star Wars Rebels, and that is that Sabine actually finds it in one of in a cave on Dathomir when she's there at some point during the show. They find it where Maul stashed a lot of his belongings and stuff. And I assume that this is the same cave or same place.
It's part of the same arc.
Yeah, it's a little I forget if it's ahead of this episode or at some point in the past, because Maul at this point has his cane lightsaber. Yeah. So
So what happened was they didn't get the whole vision from the two holocrons because Ezra left early. So Maul goads him into helping him go to Dathomir, and they try to figure out the rest of the vision. Oh yeah,
there's a whole Night Sister witch thing going on. Yeah.
They use Night Sister magic to do it.
Right.
And they destroy the last of the Night Sisters by Ezra destroys it by cutting the altar, which is like a Night Sister altar in half, and that releases all the dark side energies of all the Night Sisters. So now they're done completely. Right.
Yeah, so no more Night Sisters going forward, I guess, unless it's in the prequel era. But yeah, it's so that's where Sabine finds the dark saber, and eventually she actually gives it to Bo-Katan. And at some point between the shows, Bo-Katan loses the dark saber to Moff Gideon, which is why in the Mandalorian she's fighting to try and get it back. And that's kind of where that last piece of the puzzle kind of fits into place. But I mean, what do you think about Maul's storyline? Just like when you look at Star Wars as a whole, I mean, he's a massive part of it. But I mean, how would you, I guess, like summarize and talk about his character and like?
I'm honestly just amazed that so much could be brought out of a character that had 2 lines and less than like 6 minutes of screen time in an entire movie.
Right.
Like Dave didn't have a lot to work with, and maybe that's why he was so surprised when George decided to bring him back, or forced him to bring him back, as he puts it. But it works really well, and they brought a lot of depth to that character, and a big part of that, it was Sam Witwer. He really, because he's the voice behind Maul, he really brought a lot of a depth to that character. You can really feel just the tragedy that's behind him and like the manipulation. And Sam Witwer's a little too good at playing a character that's lost his mind. I'm just going to say that.
Oh yeah.
When we first meet Maul.
Yeah, he nailed it. And you know, when I look back at Maul's character, I think just how amazing Star Wars is in the sense that you have this genuine modern mythology, right? Like it's not just 9 movies and stuff. It's so much more. It's got comics and books to it. It's the only franchise I can think of that has as much story interwoven in and out of those movies as you know, compared to the likes of Harry Potter or I mean, even there's a lot
like Marvel.
Yeah, even Marvel. Like I mean, like Marvel separates their movie universe from their comics, which is not something that Star Wars does. And so like
True.
I get asked by people who aren't very familiar with the Star Wars books, and they say, "Oh, how are they compared to the films?" And I think instantly they're kind of like assuming that the movies are somehow based on the books. But I'm like, no, it's a shared storyline. Like they're different. It's a different story. Like you read a Star Wars book, it's an individual thing. It has connections to the movies, it has connections to the shows, comics, whatever, but it's its own thing. You can go and read a Star Wars book and you're going to be getting a beginning, a middle, and end, right? And it has one piece of this giant story. And when I look at Maul's story, it's like, yeah, he's only got 2 lines or so in The Phantom Menace. And yeah, he only has like 10 seconds in Solo. And then that's it, like in the live action films like that. But it's amazing.
Yeah, that's it for live action.
It's amazing that we can sit here and talk about the character for 2 hours based on other stuff that he's been in. And that's kind of the idea as to like doing this whole what happened the sub-series is like, you know, just really dialing in conversation about a character individually and talking about their whole beginning and middle and end through the story of Star Wars and through the Skywalker saga in general.
This multimedia storyline.
Yeah, multimedia storyline, and just literally acknowledging it for what it is, of being a single solid story. Because it's a linear story, linear timeline, and it's cool to kind of look at all these other bits and pieces, put the picture together, and really just kind of let it come full circle and talk about it as if it was one story. To think that all these things that we brought up
and
could be
so
one
interwoven.
Yeah, I mean, everything we talked about could be its own movie series.
Yeah, it's they touched on. Oh yeah. Like, it's funny because you don't realize how much everything kind of overlaps.
Right.
And Maul, like we pointed out, is in a total of like 10 stories.
Yeah.
And without him, Anakin wouldn't be the same. Ahsoka wouldn't be the same. Obi-Wan wouldn't be the same. Mandalore wouldn't be the same. Like, goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it really does.
He did a lot. The crime syndicates would be different. Like, he touched vast swaths of the Star Wars universe.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He is the Phantom Menace.
That's right. Actually, that's a really good point. Like, Dave Filoni really took that title and ran with it, because little did Palpatine know, but he didn't create a Phantom Menace just for the Jedi, but he created a Phantom Menace for himself and his rule.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think about, but one of the season finale episodes, I think it's the second last one or the third last one of season 7 of the Clone Wars, is actually called The Phantom Apprentice. So it was just a little callback to the fact that Maul is one of those menaces that episode 1 was referring to. And it's again just such a crazy like cohesive storyline that I love so much, and I love the Phantom Menace so much for bringing this character to Star Wars, and that it's then turned into this very fruitful storyline. Like it endlessly, I have this like appreciation for not only his character but like all the forms of media that he showed up in. It's always been such a great story, and to end it the way they did in Star Wars Rebels, I just wish that more people had seen it. And hopefully going forward with Disney Plus,
true.
To anyone listening and stuff as well, hopefully going forward with Disney Plus available to everyone, that it's more widely viewed, and
people start checking it out.
Yeah, and that it's just not perceived as a kid show. I mean, like Rebels Talk, honestly, which is another sub series on the show I had going with Diego. It's been on a temporary hiatus for a while because he's been a little discouraged by watching the show, because he just felt that it wasn't for him. And I kept saying, I'm like, dude, you did Clone Wars Talk, you did all of Clone Wars, like, you got to do Rebels. And he's like, yeah, at some point I will. And I don't think he's ever going to round to it. So I'm going to have to talk with him again and see if maybe if I give
him a little encouragement.
Yeah, if he doesn't go for it, maybe you or I will have to take a swing at doing Rebels together at some point again, because there's so much to talk about in Rebels.
Sure, you have to put a pause on my watch because I've been rewatching it lately.
Have? Okay, yeah. So
yeah, I'm on season 2.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. So it's
I think Ezra just got a haircut.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, then we're in the golden age of Rebels. It's a good show. There's so much.
Exactly.
There's enough to talk about in Rebels that it's not a terrible show. And honestly, there's a lot of good highlight moments in there, and very prominently Maul's death as being one of them. So anyway, that's pretty much all I got. If there's anything you want to finish off with.
No, we covered a lot, and I really have to just emphasize how much Dave Filoni did for this franchise. He really lifted up Star Wars when it was kind of down in the dumps because it was the end of Revenge of the Sith. There wasn't a lot going on. A lot of the original fans that didn't get the prequels they were expecting, they were pretty disheartened, maybe even leaving the franchise altogether. And Dave brought those people and new audiences together and just reignited the flame that is Star Wars fandom, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think a good example of that, as we discussed, was Maul.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, Maul is a character fans really connected with and loved in Phantom Menace, and I think I think George kind of knew what he was doing when he said, "No, we'll bring him back." And I think George at that point in time, when Clone Wars was still a new thing, George was always the person that had faith in Dave Filoni to continue it on in a really fruitful way, right? And here we are to this day, and Dave Filoni is involved in the live action shows and in a more prominent lead position that a lot of us have always wanted him to be in. And so I mean, like, from both of us, like big thank you to Dave for just being a hero to Star Wars fans across the world. So that
being the glue that binds the Star Wars galaxy and fandom together.
All right, thanks guys for tuning into Star Wars Escape Pod, and be sure to leave a great review and subscribe, as well as send this show to a friend. Don't forget about the links in the description below, subscribing to the Discord, and as well as shooting us an email at theescapepod@outlook.com. So let us know what your thoughts are on, of course, we have our Light of the Jedi conversation out there and about, and I don't know if you guys have checked it out yet, but we did a very thorough breakdown and discussion of that book. So if you have any questions regarding the High Republic era, or even questions about the book in general, if you don't plan to read it, is the perfect way to kind of get an idea for what it is. And if you do plan to read it, then just be aware we're going to be talking spoilers in that episode. Keep tuning in to Star Wars Escape Pod for more What Happened episodes. Of course, we're going to be doing a lot more of these. We're going to try and make them shorter, but just stay tuned for those, as well as more Lightspeed episodes covering the Star Wars news and headlines from across the galaxy. A lot of news going on right now, which I'm kind of saving up to talk about in the next Lightspeed, but of course, we'll get to that when we get there. And guys, this is a non-profit show. We don't collect any donations or anything like that. So if you can, please feel free to give what you would to us, and instead use that money and donate to World Vision, which the link is also in the description of this episode, and you can send that money to people who actually need it. So thanks again for being such heroes on this planet Earth, for helping people tuning into this show, and as always, we'll see you next time here on Star Wars Escape Pod. May the Force be with you.